we go. Okay, well, welcome to Mending Families. I
Thanks
am
for
so,
having me.
yeah, of course. I'm so excited to have you. I actually have been listening to your podcast, The Adoption Connection, since day one. So,
Oh, we really appreciate it. That's pretty
yeah.
impressive because there's over 200 episodes.
Yeah,
So
well, I
well
mean,
done.
I can't remember. I feel like that somehow I knew about you guys before the podcast. And so then when I heard that you were doing a podcast, you know, I was jumping on board right away. So here I am, super fan.
Well, we really appreciate it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
like, when you put a podcast out into the world, there's ways to look at analytics and all of those things, right? But it's so one-sided. And
Yeah.
then you kind of just like hope and pray that people will listen.
Yeah. Well, I definitely listen. So you guys are, I almost feel a little starstruck right now that I'm actually talking to you. So
Well, my family will tell you I am just like all the other mamas out there. So,
yeah. Yeah. We all are, right?
yeah.
Well, if you could just start out by introducing yourself to us, that would be great.
Sure. So my name is Melissa Corkum, and I am a wife. My husband Patrick and I have been married for a little over 20 years. We live in Maryland. We have 6 kids, 4 through adoption, 2 by birth. I'm an author, speaker, coach. Just released a book called Reclaim Compassion. It's on overcoming blocked care. And a big part of what we do when we coach folks is use the SSP, the Safe
Mhm.
and Sound protocol. So I'm also a practitioner in that.
Okay. I feel like you do everything. Like,
Well, I'm trying not to these days,
yeah.
honestly, but it's hard to. I'm excited by new things, and so
Mhm.
I've kind of picked up a lot along the way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just was reading through your bio and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, what does she not do?" So yeah, you just wear a lot of
Well,
hats.
I don't do licensed therapy, is what I don't do.
Oh, perfect. I love that. You found something you don't do.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so I actually am so interested in the Enneagram. I am what I think I am a 6 with a wing 7. That's what I think I am. But I love that you are an Enneagram coach, and I was just hoping that you could talk to us a little bit about how you became an Enneagram coach. Like, what was it that started that passion for you? And then also, how do you use it in your everyday life?
Yeah. Well, for those who don't know, the Enneagram is it's a personal growth system is really what it
Mhm,
is. A lot of people probably may know it more like a personality assessment or a test. It's really so much more than that.
mhm,
It goes back uh really thousands of years. There's like even Odysseus, the
mhm.
9 lands that he visited on his big odyssey kind of correlate to 9 ways to see the
Oh,
world. I
interesting.
know, so
Interesting.
fascinating. And
Yeah.
it's not an assessment, right? So there
Mhm,
are assessments, but
mhm,
it's really a way, a framework to examine ourselves, kind of get curious about
mhm.
why we do what we do. And I think that's what sets it most apart from other kind of personality type things is
Right.
instead of looking or putting us in a box or labeling us, it gives us kind of this roadmap to be curious about our motivations, and then through that, it gives us very gently a way to be better versions of ourselves, be more
Yeah.
integrated. So I just love it for all of those things. It's been really important in both my personal journey, in our coaching journey, in my spiritual journey.
Mm,
And it's simple in some ways, right?
mhm,
It shows 9 core motivations of
mhm.
kind of like lenses that people see the world, 9 perspectives that people are taking in information. So 9 doesn't feel like a huge number.
Right.
And yet there's all these layers and depth.
Yeah.
And so you can go really shallow with it. And I find that it's less helpful that way. And then you can
Mhm.
go really, really deep. And it guides us. I think, it's, we all know we're different. Like
Yeah.
it's easy to say like everyone sees everything differently,
Mhm.
and yet I think before the Enneagram I thought, yes, we're all different, and surely there's this one common thing, respect is common through everything,
Mhm.
or we all see relationships as so we all prioritize this one thing, and then like how we do it might be different, but the Enneagram really blows all of that out of the water. Like there's so
Mm.
many ways to see the world, and it's
Mhm.
given me so much compassion, both for myself, that there's other people out there like me who kind of see the world like I do,
Yeah.
and compassion when I bump into like a relationship snafu with my husband or one of my kids or a friend
Right.
or a coworker, and instead of thinking like, oh my gosh, why can't she see it this way, it's so
Mhm.
obvious, I can think, oh, I wonder if they're seeing it from this perspective. It's given me words for all the different quirks that we all have.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you use the Enneagram in your professional life?
So one of the things I think that's been really tricky, because primarily I work with exhausted and discouraged
Yeah.
adoptive parents,
Yeah.
is that unless they know the Enneagram,
Mm.
they don't have a ton of energy to think, oh, I'm going to do this like deep
Mhm.
new personal discovery journey for myself.
Right.
And so for folks who know it, we've been able to help them frame it around their experience of parenting and
Mhm.
adoption. And that's been really helpful. And also to give them questions, even though it's not proper Enneagram etiquette to type other
Yeah.
people, especially kids.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
helpful to say, like, hey, have you ever thought that perhaps they're looking at the world this way? And so I think one of the things that I've really focused in on in the last couple of years is, how can I take what the Enneagram has taught me and bring it into the coaching environment with language that is familiar and not Enneagram specific, so
Mhm.
that we're using the wisdom of the Enneagram in a way that doesn't require someone to know their type or know the
Okay.
Enneagram or even
Sure.
know that we're using Enneagram wisdom.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
not that we're trying to like trick people or anything, but just offer it in a way that's really accessible without them having to learn something new.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, so talking about exhausted adoptive parents, I know that your book, did it come out today?
So, yes, more or less.
Okay.
It is available to the broad public today, March 6th. So,
Okay.
whenever people are hearing this, it will be for sure
Already out.
available on
Yeah.
Amazon. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we are working on getting it distributed in some other channels. So,
Okay.
but for sure, Amazon.
Yeah, so I ordered mine today and I was like, "What? Did this just release today?" Because I've been watching and all of a sudden it like popped up as available. So I'm excited about that. But coming back to, I know your book is about like compassion fatigue and blocked care, right? Or
Mhm.
is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So,
Um,
the full subtitle is The Adoptive Parent's Guide to Overcoming Blocked Care with Neuroscience and Faith.
okay, there
All
you
the
go.
keywords.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I think that I'm curious about that. Like, how did you get started in um, your journey of wanting to understand blocked care and compassion fatigue? And then also, like, how do we recognize that in ourselves as adoptive or foster or moms of hard kids?
Yeah. So I think it started in my own journey that I had blocked care and I didn't have words for it. And
Okay.
so, four of our kids came up to us through adoption, and three of them came to us as older kids. And it wasn't even just the older three, it was like every time we brought a new kid into the house, and it rocked my paradigm of the world, of
Hmm.
how I thought successful parenting looked like, all of those things. Um, I got to a place multiple times with my kids where either one, I didn't like them,
Hmm.
or two, I just felt like I wanted to give up. And we
Hmm.
identify 10 signs of block care in the book that people can
Okay.
take kind of like a mini assessment and kind of self-assess where, what
Where they're
are
at.
all the actual signs. And but so I co-wrote the book with Lisa Qualls, who
Hmm.
also co-wrote a book with Dr. Purvis.
Yeah.
Um, and we had both had experience. Neither of us had the words. And she had posted on her blog a decade ago.
Hmm.
Um, she used to do these Tuesday topics when it was kind of back in a season where there were less Facebook groups and more bloggers, and people
Sure.
were like there was a lot of community that was happening on the blogs. And so she would take like a question every week and kind of post it and let people discuss it. And so one of the questions was like, basically, what if I don't like my kid? What if I feel
Hmm.
like I'm just surviving until they're 18?
Hmm.
Which we laugh about now because we both have adult kids. And let me tell you, parenting, unfortunately, I guess in some cases, does not end at 18. Like we're all like, let's get to 18. I'm
I
like,
know, right?
friends,
No, no,
nothing
no.
happens at 18.
I know. I know, right? My oldest is 22. And so we're like starting to be like, oh, okay, like this isn't over. We're still in it.
Yeah, I mean, like the stresses just feel bigger in some ways.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I digress. I digress.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so many people resonated with this. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that someone else feels this way. I thought that I was the only
Mhm.
one. So we knew that it was a thing. And I was reading Brain-Based Parenting
Oh,
by
yeah.
Dan Hughes
Mhm.
and Jonathan Balin, and they talk about blocked care in that book. They talk about it in a couple other books, but
Okay.
that's where I first heard about it. And I'm reading it and I'm having these aha moments. And I call Lisa
Mm.
and I'm like, it has a name. Like, this is what we've been coming up against.
Mhm.
And it was just so clear that the adoptive community needed really practical resources.
Yeah.
Uh, Balin and Hughes kind of give like the broad picture anecdote
Okay. Mhm.
of what parents need. And, like when you're really tired and exhausted, you kind of need like a step by step, like
Yeah.
practically what does this look
What do
like?
I
And
do?
so,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's kind of where this book came out of. We've been teaching about it and speaking about it
Mhm.
for a couple years now. And about a year ago, we're like, oh, this, we probably need a book. This probably
Mhm.
needs to be a book. And
Yeah.
so here we are. I know, crazy.
Yeah. So how do we then recognize within ourselves that that's where we're at as a caregiver?
I mean, I think just it's really great for anyone who feels discouraged, right?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
blocked care isn't a clinical diagnosis.
Right.
It's a specific, as I understand it, it's a specific type of compassion fatigue.
Sure.
I don't think that they're entirely interchangeable. But the bottom line is, once we even start to feel discouraged, because I would say I wish
Yeah.
someone had helped me figure out how to take care of my nervous system long before I was ever deeply in block care.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, it is going to be easier to prevent it and to kind of nip it in the bud
Yeah.
rather than dig yourself out of a big giant hole.
Yeah.
And so I would say, if you're a parent, pick the book up. Especially if you're an adoptive parent, because I think the
Yeah.
prevalence in adoptive families is so much higher because the risk factors
Mhm.
are just are higher.
Yeah.
And find out what you should be looking for. And the whole third part is how to care for your nervous system well in a
Okay.
way that
Yeah.
helps prevent and overcome blocked care. And so
Sure.
I think figure those things out uh, early, even
Mhm.
before you have kids, perhaps. Like, I
Mhm.
wish someone had told me about what I would look like in stress, in really high stress parenting situations. The Enneagram would have been really helpful. It
Mhm.
tells me like it's pretty predictive of how I'm going to
Yeah.
behave, and it's not pretty. And the nervous system care, one of the things we use a lot, I mentioned it earlier, is the safe and
Mhm.
sound protocol.
Yeah.
And that's all about really good nervous system care, really good grounding for us as parents, so that we can remain in what Polyvagal Theory calls ventral vagal, like open, social, safe engagement, even when our kids are closed off to us for whatever reason, special needs, attachment disorder,
Yeah.
whatever the thing is. And that's really kind of like the secret, right? How can we care for our nervous systems in such a way that we're so strongly anchored in felt safety,
Yeah.
in that open state of our nervous system, that we can remain there even when our kids are flipping their lids? Because,
Yeah.
mirror neurons say that when like our nervous system, like when our nervous system is around other people's nervous systems that are dysregulated, ours wants to follow suit
Yeah. Yeah.
unless we are really intentional about
Mhm.
like anchoring down into that. Okay, I can stay safe, I can be safe, I can be the anchor even in this crazy storm of big emotions that's swirling around me.
Mhm. Yeah, so you mentioned polyvagal theory, and some of our listeners may not know what that is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Polyvagal Theory is the brainchild of Dr. Stephen Porges. So
Mhm.
if you've never read any of his stuff, again, another like, I mean, I add him up there to like the Bruce Perrys and the
Right.
Dan Siegels and all of those, just people who have told us so much about the nervous system. And basically, what he did is map out biologically what happens when we have a stress response. And so some of this language is common. We have kind of common vernacular now around things like fight, flight, and freeze.
Yep.
And he took it one step further and really thought, like, what is actually happening in the nervous system? What does that mean? And so he identified the vagal nerve, which is the biggest nerve in the body, and it goes to the most places, and figured out that that nerve is in charge of carrying data around the stress response. And it's bidirectional, which means that it can create changes in our body to help us respond to stress. So like increase in adrenaline, increase in heart rate, increase in respiration if we're getting ready to activate against a stress response. And the same, but it also means that if we find our heart is racing, and we realize, oh, the threat is over now, or it really isn't a threat, we can do some things intentionally, like deep breathing or musical things to slow our respiration, slow our heart rate, which then tells our nervous system, oh, wait, I know you're thinking that we're in stress right now. Guess what? We actually aren't. We can, calm down, slow that bodily reaction. But I think what's so fascinating is he gave us the scientific connection to some things that we were already observing. Like, we see that kids from hard places, so kids with early adversity, kids who have changed primary caregivers, kids who come to their families through foster care and adoption, have a higher rate of like digestive issues. And so Polyvagal Theory explains that, like, oh, well, when your body goes into a stress response, it takes resources away from our digestive system. It disrupts this regulatory thing in our body. And we also know that because of those early childhood experiences or prolonged childhood experiences, that the nervous system is more likely to think it's in stress even when it's not. And so this biological thing that's happening when we respond to stress is really happening in our entire body. Right. And when we think about that happening again and again, kind of chronically in a body, then we start to understand why things like things like the adverse childhood experience study, how like it makes sense that people who have had chronic stress in their childhood then later in life have all these chronic health problems, right? Because Polyvagal Theory tells us that we are disrupting all the regulatory systems in the body every time we think we're in stress.
Right. Yeah. So where does the safe and sound protocol come into that?
So the vagal nerve goes to a bunch of different places and manages a bunch of different things, including our sensory integration system. Okay. And so a lot of your folks will probably be familiar with sensory processing disorder. A lot of us have kids who COTs, right? We all know about deep squeezes and chewing gum and hard work and repetitive, all those things. Yeah. And it turns out that sound is one of the primary points of data that our nervous system is using to decide, are we safe or not safe? And we kind of know this intuitively, because if you think about how Hollywood uses music, like we know that certain music tells us that could be scary or suspenseful. We know that certain music sounds happy. We use different voice intonation for different things. We talk to babies differently than when we're angry at a teenager or angry at our dog. We talk to our dog differently when we want them to get excited about something versus when they've just, chewed through something valuable or whatever. So we all kind of inherently have already adjusted to this fact that sound can communicate so much more than just what's going on at the surface. And Dr. Porges figured out that the frequency of the prosodic human voice, and prosodic meaning like the voice that we use to show that we're friendly and safe, is that frequency, it cues safety to the nervous system. That frequency inherently tells the nervous system everything's going to be okay. You're
Mm-hmm.
fine. You're safe.
Mm-hmm.
And if we hyper expose the eardrum to those sounds, then we can kind of retune the nervous system
Mm.
um, to be more listening for those cues of safety. I probably should back up just a little bit and say that part of polyvagal theory includes the fact that we all have a confirmation bias in our nervous system, one
Okay.
way or the other.
Yeah.
So we kind of know, like, if there's a really safe situation, that can be safe, and like a really dangerous situation, that can be dangerous. But we encounter so many neutral situations
Sure.
in our life every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's nervous system is going to assume, okay, we're probably fine,
Mm-hmm.
without really clear data, or watch out for danger,
Yeah. Yeah. Or the
right?
opposite. Yeah.
Or the opposite, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell the story in our book. A couple of summers ago, I did like the worst parenting thing. I like literally forgot about one of my kids. Like, I was supposed to pick him up from a friend's
That's
house.
amazing. I love
I
that for
know.
you.
I know. And it was like late at night. And I, like, even when he asked, I was like, gosh, that's a little past my bedtime. I guess I can probably
Mm-hmm.
stay up and go get him. He was a teenager. So it wasn't like I forgot like a 2-year-old, but,
Sure.
I just literally forgot. So like
Yeah.
45 minutes after I was supposed to pick him up, he calls
Oh
and he's
no.
like, Mom. And I was like, oh gosh, so sorry. Coming, legit forgot about him, right?
Yeah.
And because he's one of our kids who has felt
Mm-hmm.
safety, even that, which, could have been a cue to a kid of like, my mom doesn't love me. She like legit
Mm-hmm.
forgot about me. He was like, yeah, no big deal. Like, it's fine. I could have just spent the night. Like, he has his confirmation bias is he'll be
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Yeah.
And that our relationship is good and safe and steady, and that data point does not constitute, how I feel
Right.
about him. And
Yeah.
me forgetting him does not.
Thankfully.
um Gratefully, right? On the other hand, right, one of our daughters who has not had, safe attachment throughout her developmental years. She's one of our kids who came to us through adoption later in life.
Mm-hmm.
We had a situation where we had to cancel a visit. She lives out of state. She's legally an adult, right? She was planning to
Sure.
visit home, and it was in the age of COVID, before vaccines, before we
Mm.
like knew a lot, before the world had really opened up. And our entire family, which was at the time like, I don't know, 9 or 10 people who were living in our
Mm-hmm.
house, like, had all been closely exposed to COVID.
Mm.
And she works in healthcare, and so we
Oh
had to call
gosh.
her and
Yeah.
say, like, we're not going to tell you what to do. You're an adult, but here's what's happening. And so she ended up having to cancel her visit. And we all know that that's not like, that was not a fail on my part, right? Like,
Yeah.
that was kind of it was disappointing for sure, but it was,
Yeah.
no one really had control over that. And that sent her into an attachment tailspin. Like,
Oh.
we were hearing things like, I knew you didn't want me to come home. I knew you didn't
Oh.
love me.
Yeah.
I realized I don't really need a family. Like, I'm fine on my
Shoot.
own,
Yeah.
like, and so that's the difference between, is my confirmation bias telling me that the world's safe, or is my
Yeah.
confirmation bias telling me that there's danger literally around every corner,
Everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere? And so, when you already think there's danger everywhere, you're also listening for sounds of danger. So even
Yeah.
if you're getting some sounds of safety, even if some people talk to you with this kind,
Mm-hmm.
prosodic voice, you're kind of dismissing it. And you're like, oh yeah, but do you hear that like deep,
Mm-hmm.
dangerous sound over there? And so even like kids sitting in classrooms with HVAC systems, this low rumbling, like that low frequency is a sound of danger.
Oh,
We think
interesting.
like low frequency music
Yeah.
in movies is dangerous.
Uh-huh.
And so you have these kids who are already assuming that the world's dangerous, and then they're sitting in a environment where they literally are hearing those sounds all day long,
Mm.
and their nervous system is cued to pay attention to them. No, like, kids who are feeling safe are not paying attention to the sounds, right?
Sure.
The
Yeah.
eardrums totally doing different things. So the safe and sound protocol literally changes the strength of the muscle of the eardrum and how it
Okay.
filters and listens for sounds, so that a nervous system can start getting regrounded in that felt safety.
That is so interesting. I love how you explain that too, because I know very little about safe and sound protocol. Just kind of like started to scratch the surface on it, and you just explained it in such a beautiful way, and it makes so much sense. So, how, like, can the safe and sound protocol be used to combat compassion fatigue?
Yeah, I think it can.
Okay.
And the reason why is if we think about what happens in specifically blocked care is that
Mm-hmm.
our nervous system is so overwhelmed that it starts to become very self-protective. It starts to shut down,
Mm-hmm.
and it can shut down to a particular relationship, or sometimes it literally isolates and shuts down from, it becomes very cynical about
Mm-hmm.
relationship, right? And about what could be harmful and where danger lies. Um, and so, you know, it's like going to bed every night and saying, I'm going to try harder
Mm-hmm.
tomorrow to show up better for my people
Yeah.
and love my
Yeah.
kids more. And yet we find ourselves, quote unquote, failing every
Mm-hmm.
day. And so it's not something we can really will ourselves out of, because
Mm-hmm.
it's an instinctual protective mechanism. And yet, as attachment figures to kids, we know that
Yeah.
we have to be available to offer this attachment relationship. And so what the safe and sound protocol does is allow us to feel safety in more places. And it
Mm-hmm.
also, one of the things that we automatically do in our nervous system when we feel safe is open up to relationship, because
Mm-hmm.
we are built for a relationship. Like,
Yeah.
we are built, like, it's why solitary confinement is such a
Oh,
terrible
so
form of punishment,
awful.
right?
Yeah.
Like, it just goes to show that, like, human beings were meant to be in community with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the safe and sound protocol allows the nervous system to feel brave enough, safe enough to enter into those relationships and be more resilient towards relationship stress overall. Stay more regulated. You know, like I was talking before, like the key to kind of overcoming block care is being able to stay anchored in your
Yeah.
own sense of felt safety, even when there's chaos breaking out
Yeah.
around you.
Yeah.
And so I think that anytime we can help the nervous system, whether it's safe and sound or another type of nervous system care or another body-based therapy, like anytime we can help ourselves stay more deeply rooted in our own sense of the ability to come back to safety, right? The thing is we don't want to stay here for all the time. Like, if there's a
Yeah.
bear in the forest, like, we need to react. If a kid's
Sure.
going to hit
Yep.
us, like, we need to
Yep.
protect ourselves. So we don't want to turn it off, but
Sure.
we want to be able to recover once the threat is gone,
Yeah.
which is like PTSD and compassion.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically what happens is we're like, we kind of stay stuck in that
Yeah.
defensive feeling, like, oh, well, you know, this kid's hurt me before, so I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they're going to hurt me again. And so every interaction we come into, we start coming in already kind of closed off and
Yeah.
protective, when what we want to do is, can each day, each interaction kind of be a new day. And not, I want to be careful. Not in a way that invites like repeat abuse or puts
Sure.
ourselves in danger, right? We have to have boundaries. We have to kind of
Yeah.
look at the data and figure out what is the best thing for our families. What level of care do my kids need? What level of care do I need? But sometimes block care can keep us from noticing the bids for connection that our kids are having,
Yeah.
tangled up in that mix of
Yep.
dysregulation. And we tend to only, that confirmation bias kicks in. We tend to say things, my kid never wants to connect with
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
almost never true.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we're so
That's what they're trying to do.
conditioned, yeah, we're
Yeah.
so conditioned to protect ourselves from the behaviors that tend to push us away, that we miss the, so we get really sensitive to the push behaviors, and we kind of miss the pull behaviors. You know,
Yeah.
where are they trying to be connected? How can we be curious about the need behind the behavior?
Yeah.
Those types of things.
Would you say the safe and sound protocol is best for the caregivers or for the children, or it really doesn't matter?
We, when we provide it to families, we require the caregiver who's going to facilitate it with the child to do it.
Okay.
for a couple reasons. One, by the time most families come to us, there's at least a hint of blocked care, if not full-blown blocked care,
Sure.
or parents' nervous systems are just shot. I mean,
Yeah.
take away the specific cases, like circumstances of any case, and we all have COVID that we're coming off of, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that as like our baseline. And then
Yeah.
there's like whatever happens on top of that. And so
Hmm.
what I tell parents is I want because the safe and sound protocol is what we call a co-regulating activity. So it's like,
Yep.
it's not magic. We can't just, plop on headphones and throw it at our kids and like not change anything and like assume that it's all going to make everything better, right? It's like an additional tool to the tool belt of
Hmm.
what I tell parents is we want to give cues of safety to
Hmm.
your kid's nervous system in as many ways as possible. And safe and
Yeah.
sound is a really strong cue. It's a really
Yeah.
loud cue of safety. But if it's being drowned out by cues that are kind of going against it in
Hmm.
other ways, like in how we parent and what's happening at school and all of those things, then it really has minimal effect. So it's a co-regulating activity. It's the most impactful when a parent can enter into a listening session present with their child, able to do some kind of connecting activity while the
Hmm.
child's listening. And so we want that facilitator, like the caregiver's nervous system, to be as healthy and as
Hmm.
open as possible. And
Yeah.
I don't know a better way to do that than to have the adults go through the safe and sound protocol first. It
Yeah.
also, I think, creates a little bit of curiosity with the kids, like, oh, this is something special mommy's doing right now.
Yeah.
I'm just caring for my nervous system. It gives them a chance to experience it in case their kids have questions.
Hmm.
I just think we lead best by example. So there's
Yeah, for sure.
lots of reasons we do it that way, but those are the highlights.
Yeah, yeah. So how would someone go about finding a safe and sound protocol practitioner? Like, can you do it virtually or does it have to be in person?
So we do it virtually.
Okay.
It can be done in person. Every family is a little bit different. We've kind of perfected the way that we work with clients, and every safe and sound practitioner has a slightly different way or
Okay.
way that they support families through it, because it's a tool, right? It's not the one only thing. So it usually comes with some others. Sometimes OTs do it with OT,
Okay.
and sometimes it goes with talk therapy, like with a therapist.
Hmm.
So we do it with coaching
Okay.
and community. So we have a coaching and support community for adoptive families where we're providing a lot of education that's based in felt safety and brain-based language for how can they reclaim compassion for themselves and learn to
Yeah.
care for their own nervous systems. How can they reclaim compassion for their kids, learn about their kids' nervous systems and how they can support that. And then if they want to add safe and sound in as a layer to that, they can do that.
Okay.
So we work with families all over the world, so they can certainly go to reclaimcompassion.com and
Okay.
join that community there. And then once you're inside, you can kind of get more information about
Awesome.
how to use safe and sound within that container.
Yeah.
You can go to integratedlistening.com and
Okay.
there's a provider list there. I would say if you're an adoptive family and you're looking to use this, especially if you're looking to use it with your children, just make sure that the practitioner has experience in um, childhood trauma and
Yeah.
adoptive families, because safe and sound now has all of these implications and applications,
Hmm.
and it's being used for
So
so
many.
many other
Hmm.
things. Like some people specialize in like pain management and other things, and so
Okay.
you don't
Hmm.
want to like go to a practitioner who specializes in pain management and doesn't often work with families, and then because you're not going to get
Yeah.
the container that you need to make it the most
Sure.
effective.
Yeah.
um, Yeah,
Okay.
and
That.
make sure that you're working with someone who. So, way back when it was first introduced, it was a 5-hour protocol that we did over 5 days. It was very like stringent and prescribed, and
Okay.
we found that that was a really big ask for the nervous
Okay.
system in terms of shifting and changing. And so you also want to make sure you're working with someone who's doing a pretty comprehensive pre-assessment, offers a
Okay.
post-assessment, so you can really see where the change is,
Oh
because
yeah.
sometimes the changes in the nervous system are not don't come out behaviorally in the ways that we're looking for them. And
Yeah.
there's so many things that the vagal nerve controls in our body that without assessments, it's like when your kids grow and you don't know until you get their
Yeah.
eye closed out, right? Like without a really good assessment, you're like, did that work? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes it worked in ways that you weren't looking for it until the assessment shows you, and you're like, oh yeah,
Oh.
now that you mention it.
Yeah.
So find a practitioner that does good assessments and that who will work with you to deliver the protocol at a speed and pace that honors everyone's nervous system in your family. So we do individualized protocols for every
Okay.
single person that we have
Okay.
do it, both parents and children.
Awesome. That is so helpful. And I feel like I learned so much from you already. So yay. Um, I actually have two more questions before we wrap it up.
Sure.
And so the first one, I'm kind of switching gears a little bit with this question. And it's because I know you're not an adoptee. I am a parent coach, and I run into this a lot with adoptive families that I work with more often than I thought I would, which is that the families haven't told their child that they're adopted. So they call me in to help them do that. And so I'm just curious from your perspective, what your thoughts are on that and what advice you would give to adoptive parents.
It's such a good question, and it always boggles my mind when families, I think we have this certain image of, okay, maybe in the 20s or the 30s or the 50s, even maybe more people were doing that. I'm a transracial adoptee, so it would have
Okay.
been a lot harder for my parents to keep that a secret,
Okay. Yeah.
uh, which I would like to think that they wouldn't have, even if it had been an option. They
Hmm.
were very open with us. We talked about our adoption story at a minimum every year when we had we called it airplane day because we came
Okay.
in on an airplane.
Sure.
But what I would say is our bodies know that something has happened, right?
Hmm.
And this is coming from someone, I was a very well-adjusted, quote unquote, happy adoptee. Like I did
Hmm.
not go through my childhood feeling like I didn't belong.
Hmm.
Part of that in hindsight was probably because my best friend was also a Korean adoptee, and
Okay.
that was a blessing that I think we took for granted for
Yeah.
years and years. Like lately we've
Hmm.
been looking at each other going like, man, I think we circumvented like years of therapy because we
Yeah.
had each other to normalize this
Sure. Yeah.
experience.
Uh-huh.
Uh, but I would say, um, I think Jane Schooler in one of her books about how to tell your child their story talks about like, even if they don't have words for it, like they
Hmm.
were there. Like
Yeah.
adoptees have lived through their entire story, and so if they're hearing a narrative that doesn't match kind of what
Hmm.
inherently they sense to be true, they're you're already at a disadvantage. Like you're already creating so much room for um, I think more mental health
Yeah.
struggles, for identity issues, because there's the sense, there can be the sense of I something's not right, and there's no way to pin it to something, right? But
Yeah.
you're like, but none of the data matches, and so
Yeah.
that can be very disorienting for a person. I think separate from adoption, I just I happen to be a person that just incredibly values like honesty and trust.
Hmm.
And I know this is one of those things where like, well, duh, Melissa, everyone does. Well, actually not everyone,
Yeah.
as it turns
Yeah.
out, right? Like
Right.
it's a cultural thing. Like some cultures
Yeah.
don't, um manipulating the truth is very
Yeah.
cunning, right? And
Yep.
very helpful in a lot of cultures. But I just think when we came into parenthood, we wanted to be incredibly honest with our
Hmm.
kids. And part of that was because we wanted them to be incredibly honest back to us. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, we took it to the extreme. Like, we will talk about literally anything in our house,
Yeah.
probably to the point where some of our kids wish there were topics that were off limits, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we were really careful about what we even said about imaginary things, right?
Yeah.
Like, around different holidays,
Sure.
we have fun with it, and we can put the tooth under the pillow, and we can
Yeah.
sit sit on Santa's lap and take the pictures, and yet we never went out of our way to weave this story that we would
Yeah.
have to unweave at some
Yeah.
point when
Yeah.
they were like, huh, does that really happen? Right.
Yeah.
And even hard things. Like, I think sometimes parents have a tendency like, oh, we're not going to tell them that thing, or um, we're not going to take them to the funeral when they're 3, or the viewing, like that might be
Mm-hmm.
upsetting. And we have just, for better or for worse, like just hit straight in with all of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's because I am an adoptee and I needed to know all the things,
Yeah.
to make sense of my story, or if it comes from some other motivation. But now that we have kids who are all teens and young adults, it seems like that has been a way that has worked out for us, and how we now have relationship with our
Yeah.
kids, because
There's trust there.
there's a lot of trust.
Yeah.
We're hoping that we've built a lot of trust, and that they can come to us even with really hard things.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's what parents do want. I
Mm-hmm.
hear from a lot of adoptive parents, right? Like, I wish my kid would just talk to me about what was so hard. I just wish that they would open up. How can I get them right? And so I think we can't have that thing,
Yeah.
that desire, and also be keeping secrets about our kids' stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of families maybe be checking out like, oh, well, my kid definitely knows they're adopted. We haven't been. But I think we keep secrets about the stories, even if, like, yeah, my kid knows they're adopted, but what do they know about their birth
Right. Yep.
family? What do
Yep.
they know about why you adopted? Well, I mean, there's so many things, right, that we
Yeah.
can
So
talk
many
about.
layers. Yep. Yeah. That's really good. I think it is good to just hear from your perspective, because I can come in as the professional and as like a fellow adoptive mom and say, here's why we need to be doing, here's why we need to be honest from day one. And your child deserves to know their story. But to hear it from somebody who is on the other side, I think holds more weight. And so I didn't want to be having time with you and not ask you about that, because I think that's really important for people to understand. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. Well, can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
So my parents were nothing but honest with our story, and it also came with a perspective, right? And there
Hmm.
are things about just the big practice of what happened politically in international adoption that I'm exploring now in my
Okay.
40s.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do with the trust that I have with my parents.
Uh-huh.
And these alternative there's other perspectives that are impacting what I see about truth in adoption
Yeah.
that I'm wrestling with now.
Mm.
And it's hard.
Hmm.
And that's with having as honest
Mm.
a picture as I could have of the
Hmm.
factual parts of
Mm.
how my adoption story came to be. And
Yeah.
so, what I can't imagine is, and what I know is that adoptees that don't have as much as they could have coming into this are at such a deficit. Like, because I had as much of my story and as much honesty with my parents, I can now wrestle into these much deeper waters that
Mm.
are impacting my own self-awareness and my own journey and my own ability to have attachment with people now, and
Yeah.
my understanding of adoption, and my little itty by minute role, right,
Hmm.
in a much bigger thing. And I'm being able to wrestle, like, it's like coming up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, I'm
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
wrestle with much bigger parts of what adoption is and what it means, and my identity.
Yeah.
And that was starting with all the facts
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
could have from my parents. And so I think we're doing a disservice to adoptees if we're not, like, imagine if I had to also process the fact that I even was
Sure. Yeah.
adopted. I might never get to also wrestle with some of the bigger issues of adoption, because I would be way back here trying to
Yeah.
wrestle with the adoption itself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your heart on that. Okay, last question. I like to ask my guests what 3 resources you would recommend to families who are either just starting their journey of healing, if they're realizing, like, oh my gosh, we are deep in this ocean drowning, or maybe they're already like down the path, but feeling like the wheel just keeps spinning and the things that they've been trying are no longer working. So three resources you would recommend for those families.
So I think a book that all of humanity should read is What Happened to You by Bruce Perry and Oprah
So
Winfrey.
good. Oh my gosh.
So good. And it doesn't matter if you're an adoptive family, you're not an adoptive family, you
Yeah.
think you have trauma, you don't. It's just really good, like
Yeah.
human stuff.
Yeah.
Other podcasts, I'm a friend of Robin Goebel's and a
Mm,
huge fan of her
yeah.
work. And so if you're
Same.
looking to get like a deeper, like understanding of the brain and how it works and just a really compassionate way to view human beings,
Yeah.
then her podcast, I think it's called Parenting After Trauma,
Yep.
is just a phenomenal
Okay.
resource. And I know we already talked about it, but if you have a little bit of space and time and you can do Enneagram work, this isn't like take a test and know your number. This is like work with a coach, get in a group, like
Mm-hmm.
really do some deep spiritual and personal work having to do with the Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
I think you will be a better human and have a more enriched life for it.
Yeah.
And it's just one of my
Awesome.
most favorite um, places that, again, is good for everyone. And I think
Mm-hmm.
especially helpful in these spaces where we're adding extra layers of tricky to all of our
Yeah,
relationships.
for sure. Yeah. Well, and I will link all of those in the show notes so people can just like easily find those resources. I am curious, does you had mentioned your website earlier to find the book and to find more about Safe and Sound Protocol. Is Enneagram information on there as well? Or would
It's
we find that
not.
somewhere else?
So most of our Enneagram stuff happens inside our community. So if you want to,
Okay.
get Enneagram coaching, we do that
Yeah.
inside. Like it's already kind of baked into the
Okay.
coaching that program we take
Cool.
folks to. Probably the word Enneagram, other than the fact that we're Enneagram coaches, doesn't show up a ton on our website.
Okay.
If you if you go to our podcast in your podcast app, the Adoption Connection, and then like at least I use Castbox, so I can search kind of
Yeah.
within a podcast. You can search Enneagram. We try to talk about it with as many guests
Mm-hmm.
as we can, especially I'm super fascinated with helping adoptees create kind of cohesive narratives around their
Mm-hmm.
adoption story with that
Hmm.
help, like with that language.
Yeah.
Because I think we hear a lot of all adoptee language, like on social media,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because I have cousins who are adopted and siblings who are adopted and kids who are adopted and friends who are adopted, and we all have such unique experiences, and
Yeah.
not everyone struggles with abandonment, not everyone
Mm-hmm.
struggles with belonging, but we might struggle with
Mm-hmm.
other things. And I've
Mm-hmm.
found that the Enneagram is a huge it brings a lot of insight to
Yeah.
some of those differences. And so, especially when we talk to adoptees on the podcast, which we try to have a lot of adoptees and a lot of birth moms come through as guests, then we usually try to throw some of that wisdom in. So if you're
Yeah.
looking to see how specifically the Enneagram links up with the adoption community without having to join inside a
Yeah.
coaching group, then you can find those episodes on our podcast.
Okay, cool. And then where can we find you? Where are you?
Where am I? I am on Instagram and on
Okay.
Facebook. So, I mean, if you just search for Melissa Corkum, it'll come
Yeah.
up. Like I could give the handles and people will probably forget them. So I think Melissa
Yeah.
Corkum's
I'll put
probably
them
the
in the show
best. Yeah.
notes. Yeah.
And then the Adoption Connection, our Instagram handles actually post adoption resources.
Okay.
We do have a website at the Adoption Connection, but Reclaim Compassion has the most up-to-date information
Okay.
on the book and the coaching and all that stuff.
Perfect.
So it's a lot of different random places to find us. But if you
Yeah.
if you search for my name or the Adoption Connection, you're bound to
Find
head
you.
to the right
Yeah.
direction.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I feel like I could keep talking to you for all day long about all the things because I just feel like I could pick your brain about so many different things and you have so much wisdom. And I think because you wear so many hats, I'm like, okay, but what about this? But I will contain myself and not do that. So I just appreciate all that you shared with us today. And hopefully it's is it warm where you are? Is it cold?
Today it is, but it could be
Okay.
different. The thing about living in the mid-Atlantic, especially this time of year, is we're between an ocean and a mountain range, and
Okay.
our weather is predictably unpredictable. So today,
Wonderful.
sunny and 50s, we'll take it.
Oh,
I spent a lot of time outside today. Uh, we're going to be in the 40s probably for the rest of the week, which isn't terrible, but it's not 50s.
I know. I know. Well, enjoy this warm day then, because it is snowing here and
Oh, yeah.
I'm not
This
about
is
that life.
weirdly probably the only winter in my ever memory that we have not had a solid snow. We do get snow here. Sometimes we
Okay.
get a lot and sometimes we get a little. But it usually snows, like we usually get a snow day and a sledding day out
Yeah.
of every winter. Sometimes we get blizzards and get 80 inches, but we at least
Yeah.
get something. And we have had nothing but like a flurry here and there all
Oh,
winter,
I
which
need
is,
to come where you are.
I know, it's kind of an anomaly considering the Midwest has had a record-breaking snowy year. I don't know. What happens is it dumps it all in the Midwest, and then before it comes over the mountains, and
Yeah,
then
it
it
doesn't
doesn't have
come over.
anything for
Yeah.
us. Yeah,
Lucky you.
yeah. We get all our snow from the south. It has to come up
Okay.
from the
Yeah.
coast because it doesn't drop it on the mountains. It just gathers moisture all the way up at the Atlantic and then drops, feet of
Dumps.
snow.
That's funny. Okay. Well, enjoy the sunny weather then, the warm weather. And I appreciate your time and have a great day.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.